There's a lot of people commenting on the new Ninja Turtles trailer, but they seem completely oblivious to the clear warning signs that this movie has. There is a magic key in determining whether or not a Ninja Turtles release is going to be any good. It is called the Turtle Cycle. Together, in reviewing the history of the franchise, we will determine whether or not this movie is going to be any good. There have been 3 whole generations of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fans that have felt screwed over by the property, leaving them in contempt and disgust for the franchise in general. Search your heart because you will know it to be true. If you have ever been a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan, regardless of when you came into the franchise, there is no doubt a dark bitterness in your core. We're in the ending portion of the last Turtle Cycle, which means that no one is happy with the Ninja Turtles franchise at this time, at least if you're old enough to be recording a YouTube video. Before I get into explaining the Turtle Cycle, be sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video if you enjoy these types of meta commentary videos.
Okay.
Alright, now let's talk about the Turtle Cycle. There are 4 steps. Number 1, a great beginning. Out the gate, we start with a strong promise of a great product with a passionate team behind it. Things are looking good. Number 2, the golden period. This could last for a year to several years depending on the cycle. We are riding high and enjoying quality Turtles content. Number 3, the slow death. The quality starts slipping, sometimes very hard. Maybe we're in denial at first, but we know it's happening, and it sucks every time the series fails without question. Number 4, the final slap in the face. As a fan that has supported the property, whoever's funding this thing at this point in time has spit in your face. They are pushing this show off of a cliff and they hate you. Why is every cycle destined to fail? The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles intellectual property has what I like to call problem DNA, the very core concept of the franchise, where it came from, what it wants to be, what it has to be, means that it will eventually nosedive into the ground. Let me explain why. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started off as an indie comic book in 1984. The entire idea behind it was to make a parody, sometimes a little dark, of a particular Marvel comic book, specifically Daredevil. You saw the show on Netflix, right? Daredevil is about an underground ninja syndicate in New York known as The Hand. Lead character Matt Murdock, known as Daredevil, trains under a kung fu master to become a vigilante fighter at night. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, in a pure 1980s moment, dared to ask the question of, what if we took this Daredevil story, but instead made everyone a ridiculous animal and treated it completely seriously? And we can call this evil ninja syndicate the Foot instead of the Hand. Wouldn't that be funny? Thus, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were born. Remember, this is an 80s comic. No disrespect, but normal people weren't reading these things, nor did they even know that they existed. I wish I had known that they existed. As indie comics of the era, they were black and white, gritty, and focused on prideful expression, canonicity, clarity, and even art consistency, were a work in progress to be figured out at a later date and time. The entire idea behind the humor of the Ninja Turtles was to make a sometimes dark and dirty, animal-filled version of Daredevil. The Ninja Turtles comic sometimes gets the reputation for being ultra serious in passing conversation, which it definitely wasn't, but it was trying out a whole lot of different things given the artistic freedom that the creators had, thanks to having the control of every step of the way along in the publishing process. The sometimes serious nature of these ridiculous characters was a core part of its makeup. The creators wanted to tell a legitimate story. There are core elements to the lore and fiber from which the cloth of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is cut. Splinter, the master of the Turtles, has a tragic backstory. The Turtles often deal with mental struggles. The Turtles have deadly weapons, half of which will outright cut someone if they decide to hit them. The series starts off with a more grounded street-level story, but then progresses into increasingly more wild science fiction territory, including aliens and interdimensional beings. In 1986, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird began moving forward on a deal to make Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figures. However, in order to move the product, Playmates Toys, who they eventually struck a deal with, required that a cartoon be produced in order to hype the product. This is what pushed TMNT into an impossible-to-win scenario. Taking into account the backstory and essence of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it would likely default land into teenager territory. At the end of the day, they are enacting vigilante justice with deadly weapons in a world that has consequences. However, they managed to force this square peg into a round hole when bringing the series to a larger audience. Turtle Mania was kicking off with kids as young as 5 years old. While not unheard of, this was a combat-oriented show that they were trying to lower the age range for in regards to what would have been natural for it. In anime terms, Ninja Turtles would have been more natural as sort of a One Piece or Naruto level story and not a Pokemon level story. That isn't what happened though. It was insisted that this show was made for the youngins. The 1987 cartoon, in retrospect, feels like it's going through a constant identity crisis due to this dilemma. Now let's talk about how this fits into the cycle. The 1987 cartoon started off strong with a first season which consisted of a 5-episode miniseries to prove itself. This was a great beginning. This was cutting edge for the time. Keep in mind that we are on the heels of shows like Masters of the Universe, which featured He-Man. US censors forbid characters from hitting or striking each other at that time, which resulted in this toy-driven combat style show having characters toss each other around a lot. By 1987, restrictions loosened a little bit and the enemies were all made into robots so that the turtles wouldn't ever actually kill anyone. It worked for the time. The presentation of the story was fascinating, with each episode continuing off from the last. The golden period continued on with the second and third seasons. Being so uncontested in the cartoon space for this kind of content really helped it out. While considered massively cheesy today, comparatively, it was pretty cutting edge for the time. The 1990 movie was phenomenal. It was hard understanding why the movie had a separate continuity at the time. I'd never really seen anything like that previously. Kids didn't know about the indie comic book. It wasn't sold in normal stores. It wasn't even sold in most comic book stores. And it's not like my dad could look it up when I was bugging him with questions on something like the internet. The Foot Clan in this movie were no longer robots, but humans, just like in the comic that we didn't know about, and now the stakes were real. There were battles that the Turtles lost and a storyline that got rather emotional. Later, I learned that the movie was basically trying to be an in-betweener between the comic and the cartoon series. No other movies marketed towards kids were like this, and it was mind-blowing. The first movie was a definite hit, and just talking about it now makes me want to watch it again. The exact moment that we slip into the slow death can be contested, but I'm going to call it starting around the 4th season. The Turtles story failed to go anywhere, keeping us at the status quo with filler episode after filler episode. The animation kept taking hits due to a fast production cycle, and unfortunately, the animators just could not keep up. While this was a series about fighting turtles, there was hardly any choreography to the combat. It is this lack of choreography that really makes this show take a hit, in addition to the cheesy nature. This was a definite problem with American cartoons back in the 80s and 90s. While TMNT went uncontested in the cartoon space in America, allowing the series to get away with it for a while, the episodic stories repetitiously featuring the same bumbling antics of Bebop, Rocksteady, and Shredder, even as we were kids, became tiring. As much as it hurts my heart, I need to include the second movie, Secret of the Ooze, into this slow death. Parents apparently thought the first movie was too serious and violent, which resulted in a massively toned down feature with more corny comedy, characters hitting each other with sausages rather than their weapons, and while the strong brand kept it from being a failure, it has not held up nearly as well over time. If it wasn't for the Vanilla Ice scene, which was ironically celebrated so much that we fooled ourselves into thinking that we unironically enjoyed it, more people would be openly trashing this movie. The final slap in the face was massive this first time around. The third movie was awful and a joke with a lame time travel plot that failed to work. It was a sad, hollow husk of a movie, and one of the first times I found myself truly disappointed at where a franchise could go. Somehow, this major franchise that was previously groundbreaking for kids had this made-for-TV aesthetic and creators that just didn't seem to care. I found myself confused as a child at how something like this could have been created. How could something so bad have been born from such a great franchise? It was so disappointing. The final slap in the face is clearly the live-action TV series, The Next Mutation. Here's where the Turtles always fail. Whoever is funding the show, usually the toy makers, freak out about the previous version of the property trending a little too seriously. With seasons 8, 9, and 10, the series did get slightly darker, which of course freaked everybody out. Playmakers wants a series directed more solely towards kids because they're the ones buying the action figures. The Next Mutation became the result. It was known for featuring the first girl turtle at the time, and I mainly just bring this up as an interesting aside. It was a bit of a kid controversy at that time, back when all of these properties were sort of adding the girl character. Looking back, this is the least of anyone's problem. It's fine. What really hurt this show was just how corny it became, how nothing could be taken seriously, and it was an embarrassment to anyone who had been a fan up to this point. It was a miserable end to the cycle. The same thing happened in the second cycle. In 2003, anime was happening, not yet facing the backlash that we talked about in my previous video. This upped the ante with other cartoon shows. You didn't necessarily need to make something that copies anime, but you had to be at least on their level. If you're going to have combat, make sure it has some choreography. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles rise to the challenge with a darker version of the show, emblematic of the era, and followed many of the original comic book storylines, with co-creator Peter Laird on board to help steer the ship. As the darkest version of the series, do not be fooled into thinking that you just ran into some ruthless berserk level content. It was still childish in many ways, except there were stakes at time, and there were a few more intense scenes. Season 1 was a blast with the origin story, which continued into seasons 2 through 4 as the golden period. Sometimes season 2 ranks a little lower than seasons 3 and 4 by fans, but they're all pretty much on point. Spoiler for this series, I suppose, so get ready, but it turns out that Shredder is an Utrom, making him an alien. For fans of the 1987 series, Utroms are an alien species which Krang was based off of. Krang was not an Utrom though, but instead a Dimension X warlord. In some continuities later on, he is an Utrom. Crazy lore aside, Shredder in this series was actually just a host being controlled by a Krang-like creature. This freaked out a lot of people at the time as it went against what the comic did, and for previous fans on the outside looking in, it was conceptually absurd, almost taking away the individuality that Shredder had from the previous series. Fans who could get past this change, though, still greatly enjoyed the show. Season 3, which followed, continued to get more violent. Things started to get weird as we move into 2006. Playmakers, the toy company, thought that Season 4 was a little too hardcore for the kiddies and started throwing their weight around a whole lot more, as they were now the main funders of the show. They forced 4Kids Entertainment, the production company, yes, that 4Kids, to skip airing Season 5, at least in the US market, which skipped resolving the Season 4 cliffhanger, and instead they jumped directly into Season 6 with watered down action and more wedged in inclusions of toys that they wanted to sell that were not in service to the story. The series went with a wretched, outdated gimmick of thrusting the characters forward in time and renamed the show to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fast Forward. Everything was monkeyed with by the powers that be at the expense of the show. Fast Forward was clearly a failure, and in a last-ditch effort, Playmakers wanted these turtles back to the basics now with another rebrand in Season 7 called Back to the Sewers, which served as a final slap in the face. Originally, the Fast Forward plotline was supposed to have another season dedicated to it so that they could resolve the story threads, but of course that didn't matter to the people funding this, and the show was changed. The series limped to an ending featuring none of the clever writing or edge that the original 4 seasons had, or later original 5 seasons once Season 5 was released as the lost episodes. What started as an original great show turned into a massive failure thanks to the uncreative types taking control, pushing this property into places it didn't want to go, watered it down, and forced the animation team to include stupid crap in the name of selling toys. The show budget had been cut, the decline in quality was obvious, and there was a massive amount of creator conflict. Quick aside on the movies. The 2007 movie was pretty good, reintroducing the Turtles with a new story from the beginning, again, that made sense. Too bad though that never went anywhere, with plans for follow-up movies getting staked in the heart as soon as the Turtles franchise was eventually sold to Nickelodeon in 2009. So what about the 2014 and 2016 Michael Bay movies, featuring disgusting character designs that all looked like Shrek, and Megan Fox? They were decent, dumb action movies with a lot of eye candy and throwbacks as long as you kept your expectations close to the ground. The second movie failed to make enough profit though, and so this extension of the brand was ceased. I was a little bummed since I had never seen visuals quite like this, especially how they did the Technodrome. Now that was cool. We could potentially work these movies into the third cycle or give them a separate cycle, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll just leave them here. Now here comes the third cycle. What's fascinating to me is that most people who have been Turtle fans fail to realize that their frustrations with the property are held universally, regardless of when you got into the franchise. 2012 began the new series. While older fans cringed at the idea of TV 3D animation, probably traumatized by how bad it had been just a decade ago, and the series wasn't as dark as the last incarnation, but new fans really enjoyed it. Season 1 was off to a strong start, with Season 2 going strong as well. The series went into a more serious territory and built up the different Turtles as separate individuals. Once again, it was a strong initial showing from the boys in green. Oh wait, once again, as always with American television, when you have a hot product, different people manage to find themselves in charge and start forcing change. The show, once again, due to the very Turtle DNA that it had, started to go into more violent territory, and so it had to be watered down. The series started going off the rails in Season 3, storylines were changed, the series was monkeyed with, and fans lost interest. Sound familiar? It happens every time. the series went downhill. Finally, the slap in the face. Nickelodeon called for an immediate rebrand, change in animation style, and a refresh to the property, now calling it Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, picking up the very next year after the last series season. They decided to go in an even more childish direction, flanderizing the characters, trying to make everyone hip and cool, essentially turning everyone into a carbon copy of Michelangelo. The series immediately nosedived. No one liked this more kiddie version. The kids didn't like this more kiddie version, and it was canceled after 2 seasons. Good riddance. The cycle has not been proven wrong 3 times in a row now. You start with a strong product that takes itself seriously on some level. It gets screwed with by people who don't give an actual crap about the property itself, just the money that the toys make. It gets watered down, network and toy makers turn it into a soulless cash grab, and the original appeal that the concept of the Ninja Turtles bring is nowhere to be found. So here we are with Mutant Mayhem. Is this going to be the start of a new cycle or an end to the last? All right, it's time to get spicy here. What is going on with all of these trailer reaction videos? I went down a rabbit hole with this one. Video after video. I'm seeing dudes pushing 40 going bananas for this. How? The Ninja Turtles here are acting like they moved into an LA streamer sewer and are about to start giving shout outs for gifted subs. Anyone this old should have some awareness of the turtle cycle somewhere in their minds and see the warning signs that this movie currently has. It features a lot more aspects of the failed projects in the past rather than the successful ones. This could change. The teaser trailer may not be a proper representation of everything that's going to be in the movie. It's not like they went into the story or anything like that, but it's worrying. I don't see how you can watch this trailer and think that there is going to be anything in there that will appeal to your adult sensibilities, especially if you have any understanding of the history of the franchise itself, given what we know so far. While I find the lore and back history of the franchise fascinating, it is easy to tell that based on what we have seen so far, this specific movie is not going to be for me. There are a ton of red flags all over the place. Is Seth Rogen really the man who's going to pull this series out of the gutter? Do any of these people understand what makes a good turtle story? I guess we can look forward to a more proper trailer. Right now, my expectations are rather low. So I'm no stranger to freaking people out on this channel with opinions that go against the grain. Everyone online seems to be ecstatic for this movie. So if you think I'm insane, on point, or didn't go hard enough, let me know in the comments. I read them all and I always find them very fascinating. Be sure to like and subscribe as well. Thanks for watching.